Raising Wealth is the podcast where parents talk honestly about money. How do you take a financial risk when you have kids depending on you? How do you build wealth while actually being present as a parent? What do you teach your kids about money? Each week, we sit down with entrepreneurs, creators, and business leaders who are parents. And we ask them everything: their first job, their biggest money mistake, how they approach finances with their family, and the trade-offs they've made or refused to make. This is Raising Wealth, Money Moves for Parents, powered by Advertising Week and Tiny Organics.
Today, we're here to chat with Melody Lee, Chief Marketing Officer of Mercedes-Benz USA, one of the most iconic brands in the world. Melody has built an impressive career at the intersection of marketing, culture, and luxury, leading campaigns and strategies for one of the most recognized names in automotive. She's also a mom, and we're excited to hear her honest perspective on navigating the C-suite as a parent, building wealth in corporate America, and defining success on her own terms. Welcome, Melody. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Melody, you're the CMO of Mercedes-Benz USA, a role so many marketers aspire to. We'd love for you to walk us through how you built this career and rose to the C-suite.
I have to be honest, but also maybe sound a bit flippant as I explain this, because I find my career to be a series of very happy and lucky accidents. Right time, right place, right people, being my champion, mentoring me, putting me into places that I could not even see myself. I thought, and this is appropriate, I think, for this audience and for the two of you, but I thought when I was in college that I would have 6 kids and stay at home with them. My own mother was a homemaker and stay-at-home mom, and that's what I saw. And I think often when it's modeled for you, you think that is what's next for you, and that's very much what I dreamt for myself, and I do, and I have so much respect for that role and for what my mother did. And so I went off to college, got 2 degrees, a bachelor and master's degree, and thought, I'm really grateful for this education, but I'm ready to start having children and stay at home. And my husband entered graduate school. I decided that I would work to support the family, started a career in corporate communications and PR at a firm in Austin, Texas. That's where I just started getting thrown on really high, fast-paced, high-stakes crisis accounts. And I liken those years to dog years because so much time passed really intensely in a short amount of time, if that makes sense. So I was able to learn a lot and advance really quickly in my career, starting there. And then from there, it really was just really big moves every time there was a chance put in front of me or an opportunity put in front of me. When I was asked if I would consider moving to Detroit and work for General Motors and lead brand marketing at Cadillac, I thought, sure, I don't know anything about marketing cars or living in the North, but let's give it a shot. And that's what I did. And so from there, I moved from Cadillac into the world of beauty, working for Shiseido and launching the Laura Mercier brand in China. I did that for 3 years. Then I moved into the world of high-end design and furniture. You've heard of the brands, Design Within Reach, Herman Miller, Knoll. Carolyn, I know you have some pieces in your house. I've seen the pictures.
We do.
And really loved switching categories and learning about new product development cycles, learning about new ways of distributing and retail and going to market. And then while I was in the world of design, a recruiter came calling for the Mercedes-Benz job. And Carolyn, you opened the introduction by saying it has to be one of the most aspired to positions and brands in the world because it's been around for 140 years and has always stood for so much more than just a car. And I never thought that I would get the job, but I knew that I had to at least throw my hat in and give myself that chance and take that shot on myself. And I was really surprised when I got it. And 2.5 years later, I'm still here. And that's why I like to call it a little bit of a happy accident. Sure, there's hard work and a lot of people along the way that have helped me. But I think being in the right place at the right time has also been really beneficial.
That's fantastic. I have to give context to our listeners that Melody and I met more than 10 years ago now through an organization that was doing really important work on elevating women and minorities to business leadership positions and corporate boards. And we share the same mentor. Hi, Wes. But on that note, I wanted to ask you, who was the first person who really believed in you and opened doors, or maybe a few people? You touched on that a little bit earlier.
There were several people really early on in that PR career that believed in me enough to put me in these situations where really, honestly, no 24-year-old really should be, if I'm being honest, right? I mean, I was sitting in boardrooms with CEOs. I was on Capitol Hill for congressional testimony in front of the House and the Senate with chairmen and CEOs. I was, burning the midnight hour oil, writing talking points and getting these people ready for some of the most intense moments of their lives, right? And if it hadn't been for people who thought, oh, maybe Melody would be good in this situation, maybe she would be good support, I would never have gotten that chance. And those mentors are people that I can name out loud, like Bob Ludke, Amy Paddock, Bob Ferguson, Jeff Eller, people that just really said, we think she can handle this and we're going to put her in this situation and see what happens. And those were some of my early mentors. Bob Ferguson then became my president at Cadillac. So he was the one who brought me over to the brand side after being on the agency side for many years. Again, person who said, I know you have no experience in marketing, or nor do you know automotive, and or have you ever lived in Detroit, but let's see what you can do. So these are some of the people along the way that I'm so grateful for.
It's amazing. Okay, we're going to go back to the early days. I wanted to ask you what your relationship with money was like growing up, and what did your parents teach you, either directly or just by example?
I was raised by two immigrant parents from Taiwan. They came over in 1975 with very little in their pockets, as many immigrant stories go. They came over for an education and to build a better life for the next generation. All cliches, but just also very authentically true for the immigrant experience in the United States. And because they came over with so little, and because they had been raised during the revolution, having come over from China to Taiwan with their families, they had a very tense relationship, I would say, with money, right? They had always gone with less than they needed or less than they would have liked. And so I would say that my brother and I were raised in Fort Worth, Texas, in a very frugal family. I also mentioned a little earlier to your first question that my mother was a stay-at-home mom. So we were also a single income household, with my father working a series of different jobs in Texas until his last position at Lockheed Martin. But it was a process of moving up to becoming an engineer at Lockheed Martin, where he ended his career. And so for a long time, I remember very vividly, and I tell my own children this, who really want for nothing, right? That I can vividly remember splitting a hamburger at McDonald's, not even getting the value meal because it was too much money. And we certainly did not get a fountain drink, right? It was one burger shared, one fries shared, and water, right? I remember reusing tinfoil and my mother hanging up paper towels to dry. I remember her telling me that if I didn't come home with the same Ziploc bags that my pretzels had been in, that I wouldn't get pretzels the next day, because she was so intent on reusing and saving. And sure, some of this was fiscal frugality. A lot of it was also just a general, I guess, desire to conserve and not be wasteful, which I really appreciate, because I think those values still need to stay true. But I do remember the feeling not ever being hungry. I think I lived with an enormous amount of privilege relative to that, but certainly a feeling of, I can't really afford that. I wasn't going on, the big ski vacation with all the kids at school. Did not even know what skiing was, actually, till I was 40. um, I wasn't going to sleepaway camp, not even for a few days or a week. Couldn't really afford a sport where the equipment was super expensive or anything like that. So my relationship, and my early relationship with money, was definitely one of a little bit of tension and a little bit of fear that if we were too over the top, we wouldn't have enough. So I would say, though, that relationship started to change when I went off to college. I left Fort Worth, Texas, and actually came here to Atlanta to go to Georgia Tech. My first time leaving the state, of course. And I learned what credit was, unfortunately, because I'd really never understood credit. My parents were really, like I mentioned, extremely conservative, really good at saving, and didn't put a lot on credit. But I discovered what a credit card was, and that, coupled with my passion for traveling, racked up a ton of debt, like a ton. Um, and the first time I became really conscious of it was actually when I sat down with my now husband that I met at Georgia Tech, and we were preparing to get married. And my dad sat us both down and said, "How much debt do you have?" And Saul, my husband, said, "Nothing. What are you talking about?" And I was like, "A lot? I don't know. Is this a lot?" And I remember saying the number, and they were like horrified. And that really was the first formative experience I had with, oh my gosh, this is what it's like to be an adult. And oh my gosh, this is what it's actually like to manage my finances and not to take credit for granted and all of that. But yeah, I think it was this early experience with not a lot, coupled with becoming an adult and learning about well, not learning about credit properly, that became the foundation for everything that came later, thankfully.
So we were going to ask this a little later, but I'm just going to ask it now because juxtaposed to what you just said with your own children, now that you're a successful, C-suite leader, how do you instill that mindset around being frugal and not being wasteful? While obviously, and how do you instill ambition and all those things while you obviously now have a very different financial circumstance?
I think first and foremost, one of the things that I learned was just the value of being open about money. There was because it was tight when I was growing up, we didn't talk about it much. We didn't talk about it unless we talked about saving money or not being wasteful. And now I think the approach that my husband and I take with our two boys, who are 14 and 12, is let's take the opportunity to talk about it anytime we can, whether that's calculating the tax at dinner or making sure that they have enough cash to bring with them for whatever neato or squishy thing they want to buy, right? um, there's also opportunities. Kids are some of the most entrepreneurial people out there, right? They're constantly wanting to set up some sort of business to sell something. And it comes as early as that sort of indelible image of the lemonade stand or whatever it is. Those are great opportunities to talk about a P&L, and I did. I remember sitting on my stoop in Brooklyn talking at my child about a P&L because, of course, he thought that all of the supplies for lemonade, or I would think it was apple cider, would appear magically, and then he would just reap the profits. And I was like, "That's not how it works, right? We're gonna go to the store, you're gonna spend your own money, and you're gonna learn how money goes in and out." So I think taking those opportunities and turning them into lessons in real time is more effective than having some massive sit down like I did when I was 20 or whatever it was, 23, and realizing that this was the world of money and finance and wealth and management and all of that. So more of those lessons. Another thing that I think is really important for my kids to see is they will hear me talk really openly when I'm negotiating compensation for a job. I don't hide that kind of stuff for them. I want them to hear it. I want them to hear what that process is like so that it's not the first time that they hear it when they're made an offer for a job. I want them to hear what it's like for me to go through a conversation with my husband about, well, should I push back on this or that? I mean, maybe this is the most they can do for equity, but maybe I have more variable room here or something like that. I want them to hear that this is the world that they operate in now because that's not something that I ever had.
You talked about how you were modeled after a mother who was a stay-at-home mom with 6 kids, and you have a different path. Having children in of itself is a financial decision as well. Many other decisioning factors, of course, go in, but it is a financial one, and you made this choice while you were building your career. At what point in your career did you decide to have children, and how did you make any financial calculations about growing your career at the same time as growing your family?
I wish I had a really smart strategic answer to that question, but I do not. I did not do any calculations whatsoever. I am kind of your classic, my biological clock just like started ticking. I was 30 years old. I'd been married for 6 years. I married fairly early. And I looked at my husband and I was like, it's time to have kids. And he was like, maybe we should do some calculations. So I would say that in our relationship, maybe a little unfortunately, because it's a bit gender normative, he plays a little bit more of that risk management role where he said, I think we should maybe think about this. And if we're ready and if our careers are ready for this. And I'm really grateful that I have him as a partner because I do think sometimes it takes two people to have that conversation and then have that realization that that's what needs to happen. Me personally, I have to admit that was not something that I thought about. I mean, fortunately, decided to, or we decided to have two kids instead of six. I mean, my dream was six. That would be very different. And those calculations would be very different. But one thing that I will share though, that my husband and I have both very deliberately decided on is that we have childcare support. For a long time, we had his parents helping us, but once they left, we still made a decision to invest in childcare. So we have a nanny that helps us part time. And a lot of, I have been asked this question a few times, wouldn't it make more sense if one of you just stayed home? Right. And cared for the kids. And at one point, my husband actually was a stay-at-home father. He did it for 3 years while I was really, I guess you could say my career was getting more intense at Cadillac at that point. And we made this decision because we see it as an investment in our careers together. He gets to be a data scientist and pursue what he's doing, and I get to do what I'm doing as well. And our children are cared for part-time, or at least we have a little of support so that we can do what we also want to do. So it's a tricky balance because it isn't just about what we want to do when there are children in the mix, of course. But for us, that made sense. Does it financially make sense? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it makes more sense for one parent to stay home. But for us, we find meaning in our professional journey. So for us, this investment also makes sense.
Um, we're also interested in how has motherhood or being a parent made you a better leader, would you say?
I have become much better at listening to someone talk about their feelings. I would not say that I was great at that early in my career. Again, I'll take you back to my background of having been raised in this immigrant household by two parents who learned English as a second language, who, as I described, were often worried about what was next or how to manage everything that was coming at them. In that kind of environment, there's not a lot of room for sharing your feelings, right? That's just not it. That's a luxury for a lot of immigrant households. And I think that's a commonality a lot of us share. But with my kids, there has been more of that capacity and ability to do that. And that has translated over into the professional space. And I think that's a beautiful and great thing. I definitely have friends who joke that I'm a little bit sociopathic. I'd like to say that I compartmentalize well. But this ability to sit with my kids in what they're feeling and allow them to articulate it has also helped me become a better leader at work, where I can also have that conversation even while knowing that we have to work through it and drive the business at the same time. So I think that's been a really great thing about motherhood and wifehood and building a family alongside a career.
Um, so next, we wanted to see I ask you, how do you think about building wealth, alongside your corporate career? So beyond your salary, like the whole reason why we're doing this podcast is you touched on a number of the themes. So we want women to talk about money more. I love that your children listen to your, one of our questions was around how do you, advocate for your worth? But, we feel like men have we love men, of course, but men have a leg up on the golf course and, just how generally I think dudes talk much more about money. So this is all super interesting. But wanted to ask you, like beyond your salary, like how do you think about wealth? Do you do investing? Do you have other revenue streams? Like where's your head on all of that?
Diversification is always the name of the game, right? You shouldn't ever rely on all your eggs in any basket for any part of your life, and maybe most so for your finances. So for my husband and I, it is important to have investments in different places, right? Of course, strategically. I would say we're a little bit more on the conservative side. We're not out there taking massive risks, although we had a moment with crypto uh, where we played a little around with it a little bit. But having an openness to what's out there besides, again, I'm no shark. I'm not going to take massive risks. I don't work in the world of hedge funds or taking really big leaps, right? But having a few different sources of investments, I think, is really important. I think being educated on what's going out in the world is also super important. We all know the impact of macroeconomics, the sociopolitical landscape, every geopolitical, everything that's going on out there has such a massive impact. But you have to be well read and up to speed on what's going on out there. And again, that's another thing I impart on the kids, right? I'm happy for them to know what the latest meme is on TikTok or whatever they got through Snap from their friends. But it's also important to me that they understand what's going on in the world because you make all your investments, wealth and otherwise, based on that context. So I think that's really key. And it's funny you mentioned this is a little bit of a corollary to what you asked, but you mentioned golf, right? In the golf course because I'm taking golf lessons right now, and a big part of that, as I've explained to my kids, is because I need to be in the conversations. If there are decisions being made or relationships that are being formed, I need to be a part of those. And in the course of things, I have actually come to really enjoy the game. And I like playing it, and it's very hard, and I'm not good at it. But again, it's about, I feel like I'm about to start singing the song from Hamilton, but you do need to be in the room where it happens. And if the room is the golf course, then you need to do it, and figure out a way to be out there. Mercedes also has a lot of investments in golf, right? So I also wanted to have a meaningful understanding of what it is that we invest in from a marketing standpoint. So that's also really important. But I say all these things out loud to my kids. Like I will explain to them, like, mommy is taking a golf lesson because mommy needs to hang with the guys.
We definitely, this wasn't on our list of questions, but how is it to work in the auto industry?
I love this business. There cannot possibly be, and I know I'm biased, but there can't possibly be a more exciting or more emotional category in which to work. I've tried a few, of course, and I love them all for different reasons. But as I often say to people who ask me this question, why do you like cars? Why do you like working in this business? I like working in this because a car is a much more meaningful purchase than almost anything you'll make in your life. A house will mean a lot to you too. Most people don't gender or name their houses, though, but they do that with their cars. That car's a he, a she, a they. I mean, whatever it is, it's got a gender. Many of us name them, think about them, have photos of ourselves with our first, remember the feel of the stick shift, as we learn to drive, if manual is your thing. I don't know if that applies to anybody else anymore. There's such an emotional current to this purchase that just doesn't exist the same way with a lot of other things that we buy in our lives, right? Most of the things we buy are commodities, but then even the special purchases that we make, not many of them hold the same place in our hearts like an automobile does. So to be able to work at a brand that is quite possibly at the pinnacle of one of the most special purchases you'll make in your life is a real honor. It's really fun. And it's very high highs and very low lows, but that's the way I like it. I mean, I don't work in a startup like y'all do. That's also very high highs and low lows, I'm sure.
Our businesses, we're marketing to parents. And like you said, it's buying food for your children is also an incredibly emotional purchasing decision. It's what we eat and consume is a deep part of our family life and our culture. And how do you buying the family car is also another big purchase and emotional decision for a lot of families. As a marketer, when you're looking at marketing to families, you're a parent yourself. How do you think about marketing to parents for making such a big decision for their families?
The truth is, people, while they think they are making a rational decision when it comes to a car, they're really making an emotional one. And there's research behind this. There's a book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a great look into the real psyche of how humans behave. We really fancy ourselves rational thinkers, but we're really not. Because the truth is, if we were making one decision after another using true brain power and our true rationale, our brains and our bodies would grind to a halt. We can't constantly make that many decisions in a thoughtful way. That's the slow thinking part of thinking fast and slow. So most of the decisions we're making are fast. We're just gut instinct, like go, go, go. A lot of people think, oh, a car purchase is a really big one. I'm probably making a very rational decision. Again, the research points actually to the fact that we make an emotional snap decision and then we post rationalize it by explaining to our friends that we like the 3 rows and the horsepower, right? So it's really incumbent upon a marketer to appeal to the emotional side of a buyer. And for us at Mercedes-Benz, that's even more important when we've had this long 140-year history of meaning much more than a collection of nuts and bolts and parts. So our job is to tell a story of how Mercedes-Benz fits into your life, how our vehicles can become a part of your family and your lifestyle, so you can see yourself in it for a long time, and then see yourself in it again for the next car. So yes, you may think you need 3 rows and room for car seats and a place for your dog or whatever, and that is a consideration, and there are many ways that we factor that in when someone is searching that way. But at the core of it, because it's an emotional decision, it's about making a brand feel like it is for them.
Going back to in line with making emotional decisions, when you're also making financial decisions, you are far in your career, you're teaching your children everything you wish you didn't know. What would you wish that you could tell your younger self about making those kinds of big financial decisions?
Well, I already told you my little dust up with credit. I'm definitely in that camp of personality where I think everything's going to be fine. I'm a little bit of a delusional optimist. I think like, oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Like obviously, I was like, putting a trip to Italy on the credit card and being like, it'll be fine. So I had to find that balance. Again, thanks to a great partnership and a lot of experience and maybe making some meaningful compensation finally helped me learn that not everything can be a c'est la vie, right? That there has to be a strategic amount of planning for the future. And I think one of the things that I've read a lot about and learned a lot about now too is that we all need a little bit more than we think for retirement. And I think that's a really important lesson um, of thinking a little bit ahead. At the same time, another thing that I like to think about, and I say to my husband, who's a little bit more risk averse than I am, we only have our kids with us for a finite amount of time, right? With us in our household physically, right? And there's only so many years that we can take that big trip together, right? Um, for example, we're going skiing in Switzerland in a couple of weeks, and that's a big trip with a lot of expense, right? And definitely one that we had to discuss before we booked it. But I also have to adopt a certain philosophy that, again, our years with our kids with shared experiences are finite. They'll eventually go to school, start their own jobs. These things will become more and more difficult, and it's hard to put a price tag on these kinds of things. And again, Liz, I described our nanny as an investment in our careers. I think of these kinds of trips or experiences as an investment in our family and our family's relationship and their core memories for life as well, and their education, right? They need to also see the world and understand how big it is and how small they are. Also really important. So these are the kind of the lessons that I think that actually still that translated from my own parents. Like this is one part they were really great at was the one big trip every couple of years to make sure we were educated and had some semblance of culture. So those are the things that I'm trying to pull forward with a little bit more openness and transparency about the way money works and flows and the haves and the have-nots and disparity and all of that. That all needs to be talked about openly. So at least there's some consciousness of it.
I'm sure there's people who are listening in who are earlier on in their career. For 2026, what would be your advice to someone? Again, maybe they're working in PR, or maybe they're an associate currently at a large corporate. What would you say today is important as people progress in their careers?
I was just giving advice to a 16-year-old girl. She was turning 16, and her mother had us write our best advice. And one of the things that I wish I'd known as a 16-year-old was to look up and to look forward. I think there's this always a tendency by all human beings to really fixate on where we are in any given moment in time and feel very anxious about what's next. What's the next step, right? We're looking at our feet, going, what's the next step I should take? And what I was trying to write in this letter to this teenager was keep your head up and look forward, way ahead, way out there. Not about your next step, but like what's on the horizon? What's the next building that you can see? What's the next place that you want to reach for? And keep your head up to look up, see what's going on around the world. These are the things that I wish I'd known because as a, again, back to this immigrant upbringing, raised as a very type A, overachieving, straight A violin, piano playing student, I was always very ambitious and worried about how am I going to make the next day? How am I going to get into the best college? What is the best career path for me? What's the next strategic move I need to make? I think these things can actually obscure a much bigger hunger for the world and what's out there. So it sounds a bit vague and oblique, but these are the things that I wish I'd always known and could think about in terms of like there being a much bigger world out there and so much out ahead of you. I was also trying to tell her not to peak in high school because like that's also advice that I wish that everyone had, right? That when you're in high school, you really think that is the end all be all environment that you're ever going to be in, but you don't want to peak there. You want to make sure there's like so much more out ahead of you. And I look at all those great stories out there of people starting like careers at like 40 or having their big, album break at 45 or 50 or whatever it is. And like you could just see that life can pivot and change in so many different ways. So that's my advice today is, keep that bigger picture, that greater ambition and hunger for the world in front of you. Don't worry about your next step.
Fantastic advice. Okay, this is our lightning round. The answers don't need to be lightning, though. We can just kind of take your time. The first question is, what's one expense that's totally worth to you? Thinking more about maybe a daily habit. It could be frivolous. What would that be in your life?
I like a massage.
Great. Yeah. How often? What type?
Probably at best I'm getting them once a month, which is, that would have been unfathomable growing up, right? Like, what? A massage once a month? It's like more like once a decade, right? So that to me is still a luxury. Deep tissue, as hard as possible.
Melody, what was your very first job ever?
Oh, my brother Milton and I were the M&M music makers. So the quadruple M. We played weddings and bar mitzvahs and churches, church type things. And I think once we even got hired to play violin at someone's office for someone's girlfriend. We did whatever they needed us to do because we both played piano and violin and we earned money this way, like starting when we were young. I don't know where that money went, by the way.
What was the cost to hire you for a bar mitzvah?
I don't know. I have to ask my brother. He probably remembers. I'm sure we were cheap.
Carolyn, you want to share your first job? It's an amazing story.
I did. My first job when I graduated college was I worked at Fiji Water. And if you called the phone number on the back of the bottle, I answered the phone. There's no social. So it's like that's customer service is just on the phone. There was email too, a little bit, but on the phone. And it's like, it's prank calls. It was people like, how many calories are in this? I'm like 0.
Mm-hmm.
Or just, and that's not where my skill set lies. Like I wasn't great at that. I wasn't great at that job either. It was a few months and then I moved on.
That's amazing.
I bet you converted a lot of customers though, Carolyn. I think, there's a real human at the end of the line, which is obviously very topical to where we are today.
Who am I calling? What customer service am I calling and getting a 21-year-old answering the phone right away? A big company. So
exactly. Yeah. Awesome. Our last question was just if people want to follow you or find you, where's the best place? We think LinkedIn, but you tell us.
I am on LinkedIn for sure. So please find me there. I think I'm under my maiden name and my married name. So it'd be Melody Lou Lee, Liulee. And then I'm on Instagram at Melly, Melly126. And honestly, I hate that nickname. So I don't know why my handle is that, but it has been for 20 years. So there you go. And if you want to follow our accounts at Mercedes-Benz USA, we'd also appreciate that. That's at Mercedes-Benz USA on Instagram as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melody. Thanks for having me.